You have to truly believe in the magic.
What's up, Magic fans? Welcome to Orlando Magic UK's weekly podcast, Penny for Your Thoughts. Today is Friday, the 26th of May. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking to friend of the show, Josh Cohen, who, of course, is a writer and a digital content manager for the OrlandoMagic.com website. And also be having a quick chat about the playoffs and a couple of bits of news has sort of creeped up this week just to see what the boys think. But before we do that, I'm joined by Mr. Mikey Clark. How are we, sir? Sorted out your bathroom yet?
Yeah, just finished decorating that, mate. Yeah, I'm good, mate. It's been a good week. I'm a little bit concerned that Boston are going to come back and win the series. Not that we're advocating for a Miami Heat win either, but it looked like it was a foregone conclusion at 3-0, and then they come storming back all of a sudden, and it's starting to get a little bit worried about those Celtics. But one way or another, I think Denver are going to win it all because I think they've got too much for either of them. But we'll talk about that a bit later.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. And it's half-term week down here in South Wales, which can only mean one thing. Gary's on holiday. How are we, Gar?
I'm good. I'm excited for tonight's episode, known as Three Guys Talking Dick. So it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it all day. How are you, mate?
I'm okay, thank you, mate. Recovered from my what I would call hell week last week. Obviously, I had the vasectomy on the Monday, and then on the Wednesday, I had a nail removed. So recovering now. So yeah,
you're a brave man, G.
Yeah,
and then you had to sit through Miami and Boston Eastern Conference final games as well.
I know. Right then, so let's get to it. Before we get into the content, we'll just do some housekeeping. Don't forget that on Saturday, the 15th of July, we'll be hosting our first ever Orlando Magic UK Meetup. So if you fancy joining us, please do get in touch. The meet will be up in Mansfield, and we very much look forward to seeing you there if you can make it.
How many have we got coming, G? But just
I want to say between 15 and 20 at the moment. I want to say.
Awesome.
So it's coming along quite nicely. So no, I'm looking forward to getting out and meeting everybody. I'm sure you are too.
Absolutely.
Another important date to remember is June 22nd, when the NBA draft will be playing itself out. Of course, we've got 2 picks. So we'll be hosting our very own live watch party as we do every year. So if you want to, keep your eyes peeled, really, isn't it, Mikey? Because you'll probably put a form on the website again to register your interest, and as and when we'll put the details out, and then we look forward to having you on the Zoom call. And last thing, obviously, be sure to visit our affiliates, Fanatics International and NBA EU, for all your sports jersey needs. I know that the Premier League are in the process of releasing new jerseys. I'm sure Mikey's ordered his new Liverpool shirt. I saw that Arsenal. Have you not?
No.
No?
No, I'm looking after
saving
my
your pennies.
Mate. Absolutely.
Because, of course, you're going to Vegas, aren't you?
We've got Vegas and then hopefully a playoff trip in April. So we've got... And Gideons will be on the list, so this is the way.
I was actually looking for Gideons on Twitter. Have they not got a Twitter account?
I've got an Insta.
I don't really do Insta.
Gee, you should have been looking for it when you were there.
Yeah, I know. The amount you talk about it, you two.
Best.
Anyway, so going back to the affiliate links, please use our affiliate code MAGICUK10, which will get you 10% off your entire order. Some exclusions may apply, and there also may be better codes sort of floating around. And also, you may, if you're watching on YouTube, Gary is rocking our Paolo Banchero t-shirt. They are available on our own store, which is magicfansapparel.tmail.com. So if you want to look like Gary, you know what to do. Right then, some Magic news from this week. Our very own Paolo Banchero made the cover of the most recent Slam magazine. So, I mean, if you're like me, I'll grab it because I got all the Magic covers, and I'm sure there'll be a collector's item one day when he's, better than LeBron. But interesting attire he wore, Gary. What did you make of what Paolo was rocking?
In the famous words of Andy Townsend, not for me, Clive. It looked like the Magic jersey bit was good. I really enjoyed that, but it did look as though he might have got dressed in the dark or took fashion advice from Stevie Wonder or something like that, because it wasn't good. Some of those bell bottoms would have put a Woodstock video to shame.
So you've never worn flares like that before, no?
The only Flair I know is Ric Flair.
Yeah.
Exactly, Mikey. Well done.
And of course, it's interesting to see that the Magic tweeted some of it out, but they didn't tweet the one when he was wearing a Sonics, attire. So,
to be honest, some of the City jerseys that were out last year, they were probably worse than Banchero's flares.
Yeah.
In terms of fashion sense. We'll just leave it there.
Yeah. Social media was a buzz this week where people reporting that Chiante George worked out with Paolo. Mikey, do you think we could see a situation here like we had when Shaq was on the set of Blue Chips with Penny and he said to Magic Brass, "Get me Penny Hardaway"? Do you think Paolo could potentially be advocating Chiante to...
I'm sure he's going to let his feelings be known, but I'm not sure Jeff Weltman's the kind of front office executive who's going to let a player dictate what he wants to do this off-season. It's funny you said Chiante, because in your notes you've put Keynote George here.
Oh, there we go.
Who's now an Apple app. But yeah, I mean, Weltman's going to have a plan. We're obviously beginning to see all that coming together, but I do think there's a shot that George could be a selection the Magic are looking at taking. We were talking about a 6'4" shooting guard out of Baylor, went to IMG Academy. He was highly recruited coming out of high school. He had a bit of a down year in college, but if you look at his stats, I mean, you're talking about a guy who shot 34% from three, 37% from the field. But if you look at a lot of his highlights, I think there was a lot of. I think he can be a bit of a chucker, but I think if he can become a more efficient player and pick more efficient shots that's gonna translate to the next level. And I think playing alongside a guard like Markelle Fultz, I think that could really be an important factor for him. But I think his three can transition to the NBA. If you look at him, he's shooting nearly 80% from the free throw line, can score from all three levels. Good size. Yeah, I think he's a little bit like Paolo. I think he needs to use his skill and his handle to try and create shots. He's not relying on his athleticism, but I think we all know the Magic desperately need some 3-point shooting, and I think he's one of probably 5-6 players that we're looking at that top 10-12 range that could do a job for the Magic next season. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to get a Shaq situation, but I think Paolo's certainly going to let his feelings be known, for sure.
Have you been on any sort of scouting missions recently? Because that was very in-depth there.
Was it? I honestly, do you know what, this year, probably more than any other, probably more than the last 3 or 4 years, I've probably been watching more YouTube highlights and mock drafts and reading up on players than I have in a good few years. I'm really interested. I'm not sure this draft class is the best. I'm not sure it's the deepest, but I do think this. I think from, I don't know, you got the top 3. I think we know they're going to go in one order or another. I think from 4 down, I think the draft is very open, and yeah, there's lots of players to look at for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So the last one, a bit of Magic news. And Mikey asked me to put this on the agenda. So there was a rumor floating around this week that the San Antonio Spurs are interested in getting an additional first-round draft pick. A lot of people sort of scrambled to the assumption we could snag somebody like Devin Vassell for potentially maybe our 11th pick. What do you guys think of this rumor?
Go on, Gary.
I can't see the Spurs just giving up Devin Vassell when you consider he's a pretty good 3-point shooter. He's established himself. He's still fairly young. I would be surprised at that, and I think San Antonio aren't necessarily going to sell low. So I think if the Magic came knocking for Vassell, I think they would try to push us for the 6th pick.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily give that up. But, he does tick boxes. He is a good shooter and stuff, but, he's got good size. But then there's a guy with good size who can shoot in the draft anyway.
Wonder who that is.
Well, you just have that on your mind, Gio, 24/7. We know that.
Anything to add to that, Mickey?
There you go, mate.
Well, looking at the rumours, I'm not sure it was. I think people are putting 2 and 2 together. I think it's more the Spurs are looking for another first-round pick. And obviously Devin Vassell's name's a sort of player that could probably net that for them. And you're talking about a guy who took a big jump last year, 18.5 points per game, 38% from the 3-point line. He took a massive jump from catch and shoot threes. He shot 47% from catch and shoot threes last year. Like Gary said, he's just another name I think we've got to keep an eye on this summer, because I don't think any of us really know which way the Magic are going to pivot. Whether we draft a Grady Dick or somebody else that can shoot the ball in the draft this year. Jordan Hawkins is another guy. But you look at the guards around the league, that there's a lot of question marks about whether they're going to be available. Like Austin Reeves, Anthony Simons, Gary Trent Jr. is a restricted free agent, I think, this summer. So, yeah, who knows? Who knows? But
Mikey, you said, though, those picks are valuable. Like, they're really valuable, those 2 picks we've got. And you look at Portland, you look at Charlotte, they're 2 teams who might try to fill their roster out to go back to win now quick. And I still think, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I still think if those picks are available, that 2 or that 3 pick are available, I do think we are one of the better placed teams to make a deal if we have seen something that we really want to use, pick 2 or 3 on.
I'm just not sure. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, do you think the Magic are going to bring two lottery picks in this year? Or do you think, again, they're going to go, let's bring in 1, move the other one down the line? Because, what do you think?
I'm sure we'll get into this with Josh in a second, but...
Well, I'm asking you.
Yeah, but, for me, you draft best available. And you make it work, and you've got, the 6th and 11th. They're going to be, good caliber players. I just use both of them, and then, you don't want to bring 3 rookies on. So then I trade out of the 2nd round, unless a deal comes to the table that'll net you some sort of veteran that you think could be, very beneficial to this roster for one of those picks. But I wouldn't trade both of them unless you do get to move up, like to what you said, Mikey, to the 2nd or the 3rd pick. And now we're delighted to be joined once again by a friend of the show, Mr. Josh Cohen. Josh, I haven't seen you since January now, since the Pacer game, I think it was, where I managed to get courtside to come and say hello to you and Mr. Savage. How have you been since we last saw you?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on again. And I've been really good, trying to keep busy. Time is flying by, but the draft is vastly approaching, always an exciting time. And it's always great when you have 2 lottery picks. I feel like that adds to the fun.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we've got a lot to get into now. So we know when the Magic will be picking. And the last time you jumped on the podcast, you gave us so much information about the prospects that we thought, right, we know where to turn to now. We don't get, all the college games over here. We rely on YouTube highlights. And I know Gary's got on a bit of an obsession with a certain player, which we'll get onto in a little bit. But before we do that, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the Magic season last year. Can you give us sort of a little quick evaluation of it?
Yeah. I mean, clearly a lot of improvement. Anytime you make a 12-win jump, you've done something right as the season went along. Of course, they started 5-20 and then finished with a winning record the rest of the way. So that's always a positive thing. Clearly, we'll see from a team architecture standpoint what direction the front office goes in. There's a lot of pieces here, particularly young pieces. We're still trying to figure out whether it all meshes together, whether there needs to be some moving parts, whether there needs to be some different connecting pieces to sort of make it all fit. But clearly, the most exciting thing is the play of Paolo Banchero. He certainly showed why he was the number one pick in the draft. And there's just so much upside. He has a lot to improve on still. The efficiency still needs to get a lot better. But the way he initiates contact is something we don't normally see from players his age. I feel like his confidence is sky high. I mean, he believes that he's going to be a megastar in this league. So that's always encouraging when the player himself has that kind of feeling of himself. You don't want someone who kind of isn't sure how to tiptoe the line, but he seems to be fully confident and motivated and fueled to reach his full potential. Clearly his counterpart, as far as being kind of, if you want to go 1A, 1B, if Paolo's 1A, then Franz is kind of like a 1B, I guess you can say. And he also had a very impressive season, made a lot of strides in a lot of different areas, particularly with the catch and shoot 3-point shooting. We know he's a great driver going downhill. His footwork's amazing. And it remains to be seen how they're going to improve the shooting. That was clearly one of the team's weaknesses last year. And that'll be an area of focus, I would imagine, to bolster the roster. But overall, it was a very happy, I think, ending to the season. They came very close to making the play-in tournament, fell a little bit short. But the progress they made, I think, is very encouraging.
Were you surprised about Paolo's start? Were you surprised how well he adapted in his first year?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. I mean, to score 20 plus points in 6 straight games to open the season is not something you always see. In fact, he's only a handful, maybe 6 guys that have ever done that. And then I think he was only the 3rd number 1 overall pick to ever do it. So clearly that's not something you can ever expect from any player, regardless of where they're picked in the draft. So that was very exciting. Yeah, so he definitely exceeded some expectations. We knew that he was capable of being an electric scorer in some capacity. Obviously, he needs to refine some aspects of his game. He only shot 42% from 3 for the season. But as the season went on, he did improve those marks. He had that rough February where the numbers kind of dipped a little bit, but then he bounced right back and finished the season really strong. So, yeah, a little bit surprised, but we knew right away that his skills kind of matched today's NBA. He's got the versatility, the size, the ability to get downhill, draw contact, pull up from the mid-range. And he's pretty much able to shoot from anywhere, except it's the efficiency thing. Like, where will his sweet spots be as he goes forward?
It's also good to have Gary, to have somebody who wants the ball. I think it was the game at Washington right towards the end of the season, and he willed us on to win that game, didn't he? He was almost like, give me the ball, get out of the way, I'm going to put it in the basket.
Yeah, he had several games like that. I remember against New Orleans in late February, early March. In that period, he had 3 clutch mid-range jumpers. He also came up big in a game against Charlotte. He wanted the ball in that Detroit game. He missed the driving layup, but Wendell Carter was there to follow it up with the buzzer beater. So it seems like he embraces those pressure pack moments, not something we've seen in a really long time. And Franz does too. Franz was one of the best 4th quarter scorers in the league this past year. His 3-point percentage in the 4th quarter was incredibly high. In fact, I think among all players who reached a certain number as far as total points in the 4th quarter, he had the best 3-point percentage. I think it was amongst the players who were in like the top 25 in scoring in the 4th quarter. He had like the top 3-point percentage. It was a little over 40% in the 4th. So he always stepped up his game in those critical moments. And when you have two guys like that, that not only want the ball, but are capable of delivering in those situations, that's always a plus.
Josh, you had mentioned about shooting being a weakness, and we've obviously got the 2 draft picks. If we think about the 6th pick, would you look at prioritizing, for example, shooting, or would you be going best player available?
Yeah, it's always the loaded question and convoluted, and definitely depends on preference and philosophy. The one thing that always needs to be emphasized, and I certainly don't want to be the person who rains on anyone's parade throughout the draft, but the reality is most guys don't pan out, right? Most guys don't reach their full potential. So when you analyze, do you want a player that best aligns with what you already have, or do you want a player that, regardless of what else you have, has the highest chance of reaching his ceiling? It's highly debatable. I always personally feel like go best player available. That's usually my perspective, but I can understand where the Magic are currently at from an architectural standpoint, why it might make sense to go fit over best player available, depending on who's available at 6 and 11. Clearly shooting is a need, so maybe they'll target a player with either of those slots who has a high level of shooting and all different variations. You wouldn't expect them to want more of an ISO scorer. There's a few of those that could be picked high in the draft as well, but you never know. Maybe they just want to add more of that offensive versatility. Also, backcourt play. Do you want playmaking? Do you want facilitating? Do you want to score first guard? Do you want to pass first guard? And then there's still like rim protection, right? I mean, the Magic were excellent at defending the paint. They weren't necessarily elite at protecting the rim, right? They don't really have like, once they traded Mo Bamba, they didn't necessarily have like this premier shot blocker. So that's a factor as well. Like, do you want to prioritize rim protection? Do you feel like the paint is well protected as is based on strategy, technique, and the collection of all the guys you currently have? So there's a lot of different ways to kind of look at it. But I like best player available usually, but I think circumstances can change.
Absolutely.
Well, talking of best player available, so let's look at the 6th pick then, Josh. There's a few mock drafts floating around, and I think the common names we're seeing linked with the Magic is Taylor Hendricks from UCF, Cam Whitmore, Asar Thompson, and we've got Eamon on there, but I think Eamon's probably gone by the 6th pick at this point. But can you tell us a little bit more? I've been doing my own little YouTube scouting, but I'm sure you got a lot more time to dive into these prospects. Who do you think is the best fit of those players, or who's going to be in and around that 6th pick? What do you think there?
Well, what I love about the high profile players at the top, or at least we think will be at the top of this year's draft, is that they're all a little bit different, which I think adds to the uniqueness of the draft. If you started with Taylor Hendricks, and he obviously jumped draft boards amazingly throughout the college year. I mean, some people didn't even have him on the draft at all, on the draft board at all, like not even second round at the start of the college season. And then he elevated himself to not just be a first round pick, but in all likelihood, a lottery pick. Some thought maybe before the midway point of the college season at UCF, he should have come back for his sophomore year. They were already talking about he'll make even more strides if he returns to college. But then by the 3/4 point of the season, it became clear that like there's probably no reason for him to stay in college. He might as well go pro because he was advancing so quickly in so many areas. I think the thing to love about him more than anything else is the defensive versatility. We don't usually see guys 6'9", maybe even 6'10". Some people have said he's grown a little bit recently, but who move their feet as well as he does in space. He guards on an island as well as any 6'9" guy, we'll call him, that we've seen in a pretty long time, I think. He's also great vertically. So he protects the basket at a really high level. He averaged 1.7 blocks. He altered a lot more shots than that. He has great timing, great elevation, as I mentioned. And like I said, when it comes to guarding in space, I'm not necessarily sure he can guard the absolute speedsters on the perimeter, like De'Aaron Fox, Ja Morant, guys like that. But he comes pretty close. And I think he can guard. He can hold the zone at least with most guards and wings on the perimeter, staying in front of them. I think his team defense was really good. He slid over where he needed to from what I saw. I didn't think he was overzealous or over aggressive. I thought he played it pretty effectively. Now, the offensive side of the ball is the big mystery. He was a pretty good catch and shoot 3-point shooter in college. I mean, surprisingly, because that was not considered a strength of his coming into school, but he obviously improved in that area. The big issue is that I don't really see that much shot creation or playmaking in his game. He fumbles the ball a lot. He's I'm not going to say he's like clumsy or not coordinated, but I don't necessarily see like a collection of moves to make him a threat in an ISO situation or in pick and roll if he's handling the ball. I do think in pick and pop situations he could be effective because he understands spacing and he's good at kind of flashing out to the 3-point line and knocking down open threes. So I feel like he's certainly at minimum serviceable offensively. The question is, can he get more polished offensively as far as being able to put the ball on the deck and kind of create for himself? He has a pretty nice spin move from what I saw. It's not necessarily Pascal Siakam-esque, although I did see a comp to Pascal Siakam, which I think is a little off, but that's just my opinion. Maybe if he cleans up some of his weak areas, he can be like Siakam, but more athletic, because he's an explosive finisher. I mean, he dunks the ball a lot. Yeah. He'll miss a shot and then grab it right away and flush it back in. So from what I saw, like, you have the athleticism, you have the defensive versatility, and you have the spacing as far as the shooting. Just that alone at least makes him a quality role player. It just comes down to whether he can actually create for himself to be something more than that. The other versatile defender that people are really high on is Cam Whitmore out of Villanova. And of course, Villanova guys have a great track record at this point with, Jalen Brunson, and Mikal Bridges, and the list goes on. And Dante DiVincenzo, if you want to include him. There's been many guys now at Villanova that have thrived in the NBA in recent years. Kyle Lowry, another one. And you talk about someone that zips to the basket. Now, he also doesn't have many counter moves, and he could also be a little uncoordinated when he tries to create for himself. But from an explosiveness standpoint, from a straight line drive standpoint, he is electric, and he finishes with authority. He's a go-getter. He's really fierce from what I see. And also he guards multiple positions. He's shorter. Now he's about 6'6", 6'7". Hendricks is like 6'9", 6'9.5", we'll say. So he doesn't have as much height as Hendricks, but his vertical might be even better. So from just jumping off 2 feet, it seems like Whitmore might actually surpass Hendricks in that area. I would say both are pretty close to equal as far as the spot up shooting. So I don't really see that much of a difference there. But again, they're actually similar, but they're different, because I would say Hendricks is a little bit more kind of use those long arms and kind of guard more in space using his whole body, while Whitmore to me is a little more foot speedish, right? He's got better foot speed than Hendricks. Hendricks, I don't know if he moves his feet at a extremely high level, but he's so large and he covers so much ground just through his physical stature, while Whitmore can move his feet probably as well as any prospect we've seen in the last couple of years. So again, they seem like role players, but you don't know, maybe they become more polished and more sharper down the road in other areas that would make them more star-esque players. We don't know. I've seen the Cam Whitmore comp that's been thrown out there as Miles Bridges, and Bridges is like a border, he's a role player, but not, he's a little higher than that. I know he's been out of the league, but when he was playing, he was kind of just short of being an all-star, but a little higher than your traditional role player. Yeah. He kind of played multiple roles. So if that's his comp, that's not bad, right? I mean, he was good when he was playing for Charlotte. So those are those two guys that kind of, and then the other one that's got all the defensive versatility in the world is Jarris Walker. I mean, he out of Houston, they had an amazing season. He's another guy that can defend in space. He's I think a thick body. He doesn't have the foot speed from what I see compared to Whitmore, but he's just super tough. And another guy who can, shoot off the catch pretty well. I've seen the Draymond Green comp, but I know he's an okay passer, but I don't see the playmaking being at that level. Mm-hmm. But if he can reach Draymond Green status, and obviously that's on a whole nother scale. And so he's another guy that's very intriguing. Who else did you want to talk about? I know you mentioned a few guys.
Yeah, Asar Thompson obviously played in the overtime elite this season and wasn't going against your traditional competition. How do you see that translating? Do you think, because he's obviously he's another player with some defensive versatility as well, but there's some big red flags and some question marks about shooting as well. Yeah, I mean, the fact that they played for overtime elite makes it really tough to assess them, as we expected. They're kind of a wild card, maybe even the mystery guys of this draft. I mean, they're very different.
Amen is more of a playmaking, explosive guard who likes to get downhill, drive to the basket, play make. He's a combo guard, but I think you have to have the ball in his hands. Like if you're going to draft Amen Thompson, you're kind of having to center the offense around him. Like the ball is just going to have to be handed to him, which is why I've heard Houston a lot. And I understand they maybe want to move off Kevin Porter Jr. or make him a 6-man. That's fine, but you still have Jalen Green there. So it kind of is a fit because you do need more playmaking there, but at the same time, will it take away from Jalen Green's potential, right? But he is super quick off the dribble. And the thing I like about him is just the aggressiveness, right? Like he seems to be very unafraid of contact too. He seems to want to go into guys, draw some body contact, which is always a plus for a guard. Defense seems promising, but it's unknown when you play against that competition. Like it's hard to evaluate them. Now, Osser to me is more of like Andre Iguodala. He's more of like a wing kind of ISO defender, really kind of long and plays well in transition. I don't feel like he's an on-ball player, but he's a great connecting piece from what I've seen. Again, it's hard to evaluate these guys, but the shooting has been the deficiency for both of them. I think Osser got a little bit better as the season went on from what I saw. From what I've read, but it's so hard to evaluate them. But they both obviously have tons of potential athletically and versatility wise. So I can understand why they're so high on some people's boards. But that's pretty much my perspective of them at this point. I'll have to look more into them because I feel like they're just so raw and unpolished. And I'd love to be able to see them against, more, better competition, but clearly there's enough hype on them to believe that they can be more than just your standard, solid starters, that maybe they can be star-esque players.
Going back to Taylor Hendricks quickly, because he's the guy that I would like at 6 personally. Do you see him as maybe somebody who could play the small ball 5? Do you think he could play that role with his shot
You said
blocking in
Hendricks?
there as well? Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely think there's possibility of that for sure, because he is such a good rim protector. He seems to stay home really well in the paint. Like I said earlier, I don't feel like he's someone that's going to be overzealous as far as when he tries blocking shots or altering shots. It just seems to me like he's strategic and he's tactical and he's smart. So yeah, I definitely think there's some ability to protect the rim, guard, like I said earlier, guard in space. We're in a switch situation. He seems like he'd be more than fine. And so I do think there's some small ball 5 potential there with him for sure. He's going to add more weight. He's going to get stronger, you would imagine. He's still really young. So certainly he hasn't reached his ceiling yet, one wouldn't think.
The hardest thing with these prospects, I don't know what you think, Josh, is there doesn't feel like any of them, if the Magic draft on them, it doesn't feel like there's a clear defined role for them. There's not we've got 3 real cornerstones. You can argue 4 with Wendell, Paolo Franz and Markel, and they all feel like players that are going to be role players to start off with, and defining a role for them is going to be a difficult thing to do.
For sure. And the only thing is, no matter who the Magic draft at 6 or 11 or both, is you never want to cap them. So you never want to say, well, we're only designating you to this role. We're not going to like train you to be a star. Like to me, I don't know where the line is in the draft where you say, okay, like you're bringing a guy in to be a role player and that's that. I feel like definitely lottery, maybe even down to like 20. Like you draft a guy with the belief that if we mold this guy into be the best version of himself, that he has a chance to be the best player on a team, let alone be the 3rd or 4th string guy that can be serviceable and contribute in various ways. So I feel like even though maybe with the mindset right now, basically you have Paolo, you have Franz, you have cap space if you decide to go after a free agent, you never know with trades. I still think like no matter what, like the guy we pick at 6 and maybe even 11 to some extent, you still look at them and question, is there a way where you can unleash them to be more than just a serviceable role player? I would hate to cap any player just because they might be walking into a situation where there's already a defined, like, if you want to call Powell the 1 and Franz the 2 as far as the depth chart, maybe that's true at the moment, but who knows? What if the guy that's pick 6 ends up surpassing both of them? Like, you don't know until they're in house and you really get a good feel for them. Because we've seen that before. It's happened where you think you have your 1 and your 2, and all of a sudden it gets thrown off because a guy comes in, he's like, oh, maybe this guy's actually a little better than that guy. You know, it seems unlikely just because of how good Paolo was his rookie year and how much Franz is progressing, but you never know.
No.
One player I really like the look of is Grady Dick. Apart from his shooting, Josh, what's your insights there? And also, you've gone through a lot of traditional players there who are being linked as good lottery picks. Is there anyone who you think is flying under the radar as a bit of a sleeper pick for the Magic?
Yeah, as far as Grady Dick, I would say, though, yes, shooting is clearly his best skill by far and away. But he's not just a traditional shooter. I feel like he's not just a catch and shoot guy. Like, he's a relocator. He's an on the move shooter. He's a pull-up shooter. Like, he's got the whole package of shooting that you don't normally see in today's NBA. I would say the last few years, the best relocation and on the move shooter has been Klay Thompson. I did see Grady being compared to him offensively, and I don't think it's that far-fetched, to be honest. I mean, Grady's 6'8", so he's got the length. He moves around the court as smoothly and as sharply as anybody that we've seen come into the NBA in recent years. His shooting touch is obviously pretty amazing, but I just love the fact that he moves the defense, right? Like, a lot of guys are just stationary shooters. They set up in a corner or the wing and they wait for the ball to get kicked out to them. Like, Grady's just always on the move, and he's able to shoot instantaneously upon the catch and make them at a pretty high rate, which is what has made Klay so incredibly effective over the last several years. Now, I'm not suggesting that he's going to quite be at Klay's level ultimately, but as far as style, there's an aesthetic there that is somewhat comparable. And I do think he's a much better pull-up jump shooter than he's been given credit for. He's good going to his right, maybe 1 or 2 dribbles and pulling up from the mid-range. So he's got that in his bag as well. I think the issues there is that if you want him to create, he doesn't have all these juke moves and these ancillary elements to his game to make him an ISO scorer, a pick and roll scorer, which would diminish him a little bit from being like a guy you might want to say, you can turn the keys to. But as far as the overall shooting package, I feel like it's all shooting, but it's different kinds of shooting. So I always feel like that has to be emphasized with him because he's an all around shooter. I feel like he's I mentioned Klay, but there are a few other guys that are really good relocation shooters. Like, we're seeing one in the playoffs now in Max Strus. Now, Grady Dick seems like he's got far more pieces to his game and he's longer and all that. But Strus has come on largely because he shoots in different variations. I mean, Miami doesn't really have much else shooting wise. You know, it's him and maybe Duncan Robinson. And Max just moves the defense, right? It creates havoc that way. And I feel like Grady Dick does that as well. The issue has been, at least the questions about Grady Dick have been defense, right? Does he move his feet well? Can he guard multiple positions? He claims, we saw him at the combine, he says he's a versatile defender, someone who can guard multiple positions. He obviously has the length at 6'8". The question there is the foot speed. I know in college, opponents really went after him. They put him in a lot of switch situations, and he had mixed success. There was a lot of failure, but there wasn't like a complete zero there. I feel like he was at least semi-effective in situations. So I feel like he's a more all-around player. He's also really good in transition. You know, he can fly up and down the court. He's willing to play fast. But does he have the toughness? Does he have the intensity? Getting downhill? Maybe not. I mean, that's not his MO, at least at the moment. But I wouldn't necessarily like ground him as just like, a lot of people have said Joe Harris, Corey Kispert, even Kyle Korver from a few years ago. Like, now, if he's Korver, that's still one of the best shooters of all time. But I wouldn't like put him at that floor of like, he's just going to be a Corey Kispert. And Kispert was really good at the end of the season. He was one of the best catch and shoot 3-point shooters all year, and especially in the second half of the year. So like, worst case scenario, if that was the case, that wouldn't be that bad either. But I just think Grady brings a lot more to the table than him. So just kind of as a comp. And then
just
you
to
asked,
jump in there, the person you've described there, and the person that sticks out in my mind is Danilo Gallinari.
Yeah, I mean, Gallinari had in his prime, he was a little bit more of a creator in the sense that he can get down. He drew a lot of contact. Like he was massive too. I think he was listed at 6'10", right? I think he was a little bit more of like, he had that toughness and like can create a little bit more on his own off the bounce, getting to the basket. But yeah, I mean, you never know that could, especially as Grady fills out, you never know what he can transform into. I would hope, best case scenario, like I said earlier, like even if he's a diet version of Klay Thompson, like that's going to be amazing. Like Klay's obviously Hall of Famer and perennial All-Star, multi-time champion, second best player on one of the best teams of all time. So, maybe that's too high for him, but I just feel like the movement is similar and the shooting stroke is similar. I don't know if he'll quite be as electric as Klay was in his prime, but like I said, the relocation shooting, the on-the-move shooting, that's what the Warriors do so well. It's not just Klay, it's Steph, it's Jordan Poole. They move around so well and they create so much space that way with Draymond facilitating. And, obviously the Magic have the playmakers already in place. So they can probably get Grady, if they were to draft him, let's say, or any shooter for that matter, because there's a few others in this draft, that player or players, if it's more than one, they're going to have a lot of space. I mean, they're going to be able to capitalize on their strengths on this team. So if one of them was taken, whether it's Grady Dick or Jordan Hawkins, he's another great shooter. I think they would love to play in Orlando with Paolo and Franz and Markelle, and even Wendell, who's a very good playmaker from the center spot.
Oh, definitely. Any other sleepers?
Well, I don't know if he necessarily
mentioned about.
Yeah, I don't know if he necessarily fits with the Magic, but I'm not ruling out Gigi Jackson being like a star player in this league. Now, he's the youngest player in the draft. He hasn't turned 19 until December. He's got the body of like Bam Adebayo, but he plays a little differently. He didn't shoot it well in college at South Carolina. I mean, he was really inefficient, but he's really raw. But as far as putting the ball on the floor, creating his own shot, a little bit of playmaking, like I would say he's got, you could argue if you look at everyone in this draft, he might have the best chance at being like the prolific scorer ultimately, just based on his skill type, because he's a hunter for shots. Like he seeks out opportunity to create space off the dribble, get to the mid range, get to the basket. But we just don't know if he has a shooting touch because he did not shoot it well in college. So he's someone that kind of catches my eye just from that's like shoot for the stars, but it could be a complete bust. I feel like I don't think he falls in the middle. I think he either hits or he just completely fails just based on his skill type, because I don't see him as like a role player just based on the way he plays, just from what I've seen. But he's built really well at his age. I mean, like I said, he doesn't turn 19 until December. So he's the youngest player in this draft. And I feel like he's a scorer's mentality guy, which the Magic may not need that with Paolo and Franz kind of handling those major roles. But you never know. Like I said, you can't cap a player. So he's someone to keep an eye on. I mentioned Hawkins before from UConn. Obviously, he won a national championship. I mean, statistically, he was even a better shooter than Grady Dick. He shot also in the low 40s from three, but it was a little higher than Grady. We spoke to him at the combine too, and he models his game after Ray Allen and Richard Hamilton. Really good coming around screens, just an excellent shooting touch, shoots from every spot around the perimeter. And there's obviously a good track record with UConn shooters. So he's someone to keep in mind as well, in my opinion, just because if you need shooting and you're worried about Grady's defensive limitations or the fact that he can't create his own shot, well, maybe Hawkins is someone to consider just because the shooting touch might be even better. One
last player I want to ask you about, Josh, as well. We talked about Chiante George just before you joined us, who's been working out with Paolo. Where do you see him? Do you see him as a potential fit for the Magic as well in the draft?
Well, he's a total shot hunter, right? Like he is looking for buckets. He reminds me of Jordan Poole, maybe a best case scenario type scenario. I could see like Cam Thomas a little bit. Like he has, in my estimation, one thing in mind, and that is to score. Now, it doesn't mean he can't play make, doesn't mean he can't facilitate, doesn't mean he can't run an offense ultimately. But at Baylor, it just seemed to me like when he's hot, he's hot. But when he's off, you kind of get run to the ground a little bit because He's a little one-dimensional from what I saw. And so he's another guy that's kind of like high reward, but also kind of high risk if you pick him high in the draft. I mean, he feels like a spark plug. He feels like a six-man-ish type player. Now, that doesn't mean he can't be a superstar and average 30 points a game, but he's not big. I mean, what is he listed at? Like 6'2", 6'3", 6'4"? In today's NBA, that's pretty small. We saw him at the combo. I mean, I don't want to say he's not 6'4" because I don't know, but he looks shorter than 6'4". That's just my vision. But like clearly he is someone that you need a bucket. And if he's feeling it, you can trust him to be a guy to get you a bucket, right? We saw that in Brooklyn with Cam Thomas. Obviously, Jordan Poole has done it in Golden State. But like when they're off, it just feels like everything else gets kind of thrown off a little bit. So tricky player to analyze.
It's like you discussed Terrence Ross.
Right. Well, Terrence is obviously more of an off-ball player, sure, coming around screens, spotting up. While the ball is going to be in George's hands. He's actually a little bit like Cole Anthony in that regard, where he's a shot creator, very crafty, has a lot of different movements to off the dribble, create space, got the step back jumper, things of that nature. So I feel like if scoring is the priority, then he is someone to definitely consider because that's his main function.
Yeah, brilliant. So thank you for that. Well, let's move the conversation back to the current team a little bit, and in particular the guard rotation, if you don't mind. What would you like to see out of the sort of the three core guards that we have in my boy Markel, Jalen, and Cole this offseason?
Yeah, they're also interesting because they're so different. That's what I love. I love analyzing different players because a lot of times when guys are similar, it's like you're trying to find differences, but sometimes there aren't that many and it gets a little boring. But between Markel, Jalen, and Cole, they're literally just completely different players, which I think actually helps because that helps when you're building the roster out. You have variation, which I think is always a plus. Markel proved all year that he's a great game manager. He clearly got some bursts back from where he was, a couple years ago, battling back from injury and all that. He is one of the best in the league, not just on the Magic, but to me, one of the best in the league at getting into the paint and finding the open shooters for kickouts. So he's a great kickout shooter. And that is how teams generate their best 3-point looks, statistically and stylistically. You get your best looks from three come when the ball gets into the paint, defense collapses, and then there's shooters on the perimeter. If the Magic had more spacing as far as higher level shooters on the roster, I think Markel could be top 10, maybe even top 7, 8 in assists. I don't think there's any question about it. Just from a creating for others standpoint, Markel is one of the best at locating shooters on the perimeter when he gets into the paint, and his eyes seem to be everywhere. So that to me is his biggest strength. Obviously, he's got the mid-range shot where he can vault up from anywhere between 7 to like 12, 13 feet and hit it pretty consistently. We know what his weakness is. There's no secret there. Will he ever develop at least a semi-reliable 3-point shot, particularly in catch and shoot? Because the pull-up jumper to me is an outdated thing. Like I wouldn't even want my guards to take pull-up jumpers, and not to say that they aren't used in certain situations, but the ball gets stuck when you just rely on the pull-up jumper so much. To me, it's all about catch and shoot, especially with what the Magic have in addition to Markel with Paolo and Franz. To me, and this is the other big thing I want to emphasize, is that you look at the 4 teams that were in the conference finals. Obviously, 2 of them are still playing in the conference finals, and the other 2 just wrapped up. Nikola Jokic runs the show in Denver. LeBron James runs the show in LA. Jason Tatum runs the show in Boston. And then Miami uses Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo collectively to run the show in Miami. What they all have in common is that none of them are traditional guards. They're all big. They're all versatile. They can operate in different areas of the floor. They're all tremendous kick-out passers. Also terrific high-low passers. So if they find cutters, which all of those guys that I mentioned are extremely good at, Bam is amazing at it. Jokic is obviously amazing at it. LeBron, outside of his explosiveness, has almost made a living out of it for many years, just being this, visionary and having incredible instincts, finding guys in different situations. So the thing I love about the Magic situation more than anything else is that you have two guys that fit that mold. They're both 6'10". They both have incredible vision and instincts. They can operate from anywhere on the floor, and they can find teammates in their most favorable situations. And once the role players fill out, again, I go back to the whole, like, you don't want to cap a player. If they pick a guy at 6 and he's better than whoever else is on the roster, so be it. That's great. You always want to have as many of those guys as possible. But from my vantage point, if you have spacing on the floor with Paolo and Franz, those guys are going to thrive. They're just because Paolo and Franz's playmaking is going to keep getting better and better and better. I definitely think Paolo specifically, he's going to rank top 10 in triple doubles in his prime. And I'm not going to call them point guards, but I do think they're the modern playmakers of the league. Like, those are the type of players you need kind of controlling the offense, orchestrating the offense, because we're seeing this with other teams. The best teams in the league don't have ball dominant guards. If you think about it, none of them really did. And if they did, they didn't play them that much. Like, there's a reason why D'Lo, no disrespect to D'Angelo Russell, he kind of, I don't want to say ineffective, but he really didn't have much value in the series against Denver. Now, a lot of that was because of defensive reasons, but you want the ball in the hands of the guys that have the ability to see the entire floor and make the right plays in every situation. And right now, it's the guys that are 6'8" and above who are doing that in the league for the most part. And there's exceptions. I'm not denying it, but I still think there's a reason why those teams rose to the top. And you want as much playmaking as you can get in the front court. And the guards, to me, spacing and ball movement, being smart, things of that nature. So anyways, I went on a tangent there, but that was just a perspective that I have. And I do think with Markelle specifically, for him to really excel around Paolo and Franz, the shooting has to get better. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to be electric, but I think it has to be solid enough where you can rely on him in situations where he's just kind of a stationary shooter. And the same thing with Jalen and Cole, for that matter. I mean, Jalen, we know, is a ball hawking guard, great defensive player, dives for everything, gets his hand on the ball, gets his hand in the passing lanes, deflections add up, takes charges. He was second on the team in charges behind Mo Wagner. So we know defensively, Jalen's going to give it every single night. We know he's a little reckless when he attacks the basket, but I don't think the Magic need him to be that anymore. I think his rookie year, that was experimented with. I don't think that's a necessity for him anymore to be that attacking guard. I feel like with him, it's about the spot up shooting, playing at the right pace, not being out of control, keeping turnovers down, being a pseudo point guard, where in situations you're more of a connecting piece. He reminds me a lot. There's two players he really reminds me a lot of. One, George Hill, when he played with the Pacers in the early 2010s. The role that he had alongside Paul George and Lance Stevenson, to me, is something that Suggs can be with Paolo, Franz, whoever else might get added into the bunch. I could see him in that role and fit in perfectly. When I was watching the Sixers-Celtics series, I was watching DeAnthony Melton play, and I'm like, that looks a lot like Jalen Suggs. And he really made things tough on Jason Tatum. Now, he doesn't have the length. That's the biggest issue with Melton, and I think it's kind of the issue with Suggs. But toughness, never lets anyone get by him off the dribble, off the bounce, on the drives. That's a rarity in the league today. So Jalen just plays with 100% intensity. You got to love it. I definitely think he's got a chance to make an all-defensive team at some point in his career. And so if he could just go into the mid-30s from three, like I know he made big strides last year. He went from 21 to 33, 32, 33. If he could just get it up to 35, 36, 37 with a reasonable number of attempts, his value is going to be super high. No, he's not going to be the electric scorer. Many thought, hoped anyway when he first got drafted, he could be this, 25 plus point per game scorer. Maybe that's not going to happen. But as far as like impact and value, I wouldn't be surprised if he has just as much value as any role player in the league in his prime. If he can really figure out the niche that's best for him. And then I thought the way Cole played at the end of the season was exactly what he needs to be going forward. Like crafty, as long as he's efficient, because he can create his own shot. We know that. We've seen it time and time again. When he's on, he's hard to stop. And I thought the way he played in the last month of the year was the perfect role for him and the perfect amount of touches, right? Because he didn't overdo it. He picked his spots. He got to his spots, and he was comfortable and he was confident. And he made shots from pretty much anywhere on the floor. So he could be a 6th man of the year guy. There's no doubt in my mind about that. He played like I actually thought he was entering the conversation the last month of the year for 6th man of the year. I know Malcolm Brogdon for the entire season made more sense. And, you could say like Emmanuel Quickley or Malik Monk should have been in that conversation as well. Bobby Portis. But like, I thought Cole at least got into the top 8 in that conversation by the time we hit the end of the season. So if Cole can just extend that into next year, he also will have carved out a role that's perfect for him.
Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely. So if the Magic stand pat, Josh, and take the 2 rookies in the first round, what do you think a successful season looks like for us next year?
Yeah, another loaded question. I never want to put a win total on a prediction just because, well, first we need to see what the team looks like going into the year before anything. But I mean, listen, they made a 12-win jump last year. You got to figure the key guys are going to get a little bit better. Paolo, Franz, and then going down from there. Like they're all going to get a little bit better, if not a lot better, hopefully. I expect through the draft, through trade, through free agency, there's going to be some added pieces that align properly with the core guys of the team. And that'll inevitably make the team as a whole better. I still think what it comes down to is how they do on the defensive end. We've said it time and time again, even when they first started this rebuild, back before the 2021-22 season, like the way this team's being built, they have a chance to be an elite defensive team. We kind of got flashes of it 2 seasons ago. We got even more flashes of it this past season. They kept climbing in the defensive efficiency category. It didn't end. It doesn't look great when you look at them. I think they finished 24th or whatever it was in defensive efficiency. They were in the 20s, but like the way it kept ascending past like the first month of the season, it just proved that they're on their way to being either a very good defensive team or maybe even an elite defensive team. And as we know in the playoffs, that's what it really comes down to. Denver has been a little bit of an exception there because they were not a top 10 defensive team for most of the season, but they've turned it on defensively in the playoffs. But you look at Boston, Miami, even the Lakers, the way they changed their season around, it was all because of the defense. Like Miami was one of the worst offensive teams in the league in the regular season. They were bottom 5, but they were top 8 in defense. They're top 8 in defense every year since they got LeBron. But obviously, since even LeBron left, they've maintained that defensive tenacity and versatility, and they're just hard-nosed. They play with so much toughness. Their zone is so hard to crack. I think the Magic can be similar because Jamal is an amazing defensive coach. They have the right principles in place. They teach the right things, all about the bell plays and playing hard, diving on the floor, taking charges. They were great so they were also top 5 in protecting the paint. That's a great indicator of where your defense is. What was it? New York, Miami. Those were 2 of the best paint protecting teams in the league. The Magic were right there with those teams. So Boston's always good. So to me, those are signs that the progress is being made in a very key area. And so should I say playoffs? At least playing tournament, right? I would think that'd be a minimum expectation, but hopefully at least like a 7-8 seed in the playoffs. But if not, at least right on the fringe, make the play-in tournament would be obviously a clear, at least goal going into the year.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Josh. That was super insightful. I'm sure we've all learned quite a lot today about these prospects, and gets us a bit more excited for the draft now next month. So thank you, mate. And we look forward to seeing you again, hopefully on the pod and hopefully for a playoff series next year. That'd be nice.
That'd be great. Well, thanks so much for having me on as always. I really appreciate it.
Right then, so let's just get to the state of the weekly NBA roundup. So the Denver Nuggets, everybody be very, very, very happy that they swept the Los Angeles Lakers last weekend, punching their ticket to the NBA Finals. Aaron Gordon had himself a decent display in Game 4. So I want to ask you, are we happy for him, given his comments post-game, Mikey?
I am happy for him. He hasn't really done himself any favours with Magic fans with what he said. I don't think he necessarily meant it as a shot at the organisation. I think it was more of a reflection that he's now playing on a team that suits the way he plays and what plays to his strengths. I mean,
Fourth option, you mean?
Yeah, but he's playing alongside. I mean, look, AG's best role is on-ball defender, being one of the team's best defenders, and that is his clear defined role. He's now added the 3-point corner threes to his game. We know he's a bit of a dunker, and I just think he's not done himself any favours what he said. But end of the day, I mean, we're just happy the Lakers are out. That's the main thing. I said a couple of weeks ago when the conference final started, I'd love it if they got swept. I didn't actually expect it to happen, but it did. But yeah. I think we're past AG. I think there's enough water under the bridge now. We can let all the AG stuff go because we've got a bright future. So
we can, and like you said, I think it just came out kind of wrong, and we're just happy that the Lakers have been beaten, and we just look forward to the Denver Nuggets beating one of these next two teams. So obviously, go on.
Is LeBron going to retire?
Oh, that really annoyed me. Really annoyed me. The Denver Nuggets have made the NBA Finals the first time ever, and the headlines the next day about LeBron James and not how good the Denver Nuggets have been, being the first seed, getting to the finals. It was
all 4 games, every game, the next day headlines was still all about the Lakers. Every single game. And LeBron's not retire. If anybody thinks that LeBron's going to retire and he's not having his last season go around, it's not going to happen. I mean, you think for all these years he's used free agency and he's used all these things as leverage to try and get whatever team he's been on to improve and build around him. Well, he's 38 now. He's still a really, really good player, but retirement's the only bit of leverage that he's got now to throw into the media. But yeah, he's not going anywhere yet, is he?
And he still hasn't beaten the Orlando Magic in the playoffs. So there we have it. So in the East, last night we had the Boston Celtics defeat the Miami Heat, and I just want to make a little note here. I did say when they were 3-0 up, the Heat now, I said to my mate Rich Barrett, who runs NBA UK Fans, so shout out to him. I said, it's all right. You still got this. And I'm saying Celtics in 7. For me, they're far superior. Anyway, Gary, what do you think is going to happen going forward now? These next 2 games, obviously the next one in Miami is key. If they blow this one, the Heat, surely it's all over.
I've got to say, G, when we got you on about the Lakers there, I was half expecting you to go Kwame Brown. Start a rant. You needed to go and fire your car up and just drive around Wales just having a rant. I can see you being the Welsh Kwame Brown, definitely, no doubt. For me, I think Boston's maybe left it a little too late, and I do think that they should be the team that's going to the finals for the East. And I have said for a while it was going to be a Boston Denver final. But I don't know whether I can see in this series Miami losing 4 games straight when you've got Jimmy Butler and Spoelstra as your coach. I just don't know if I can see it. So I think it might be slightly too late. if I was putting a bet on it, I would have Miami to close it out in Miami.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I think they're kicking themselves over game 2. I think they're really
Yeah.
kicking themselves, but it's the whole thing of they've got to win 4 in a row against Jimmy Butler, who has been quiet since game 2, but I expect Jimmy Butler will have a big game. There you go.
In one of those two. Yeah. Well, they're halfway there. No other team's ever done it. So it would be some accomplishment.
I will say, given what was said on Twitter when I was talking about this, I'm not someone who wants Boston to win everything and something like that, because there was a comment made. But if you said to me, there are 2 teams playing and one of them is not the LA Lakers, but one of them has Kyle Lowry, I want the other team to win.
Yeah.
And that's where it's at. So Lowry plays for the Heat, so I want Boston to win.
It's a little bit, yeah. For me, the power three of the Lakers, the Celtics, and then the Heat in that order for me. But in this instance, I would like the Boston Celtics to beat the Heat because just the chirping from our dear cousins down in South Florida, it's starting to get a little bit nauseating.
We'll call them cousins.
Okay. All
cousins with webbed feet, or maybe.
Well, you said that, not me. Not me.
Mikey's getting cancelled.
So no, I would like. Well, I'd like them to go to 7, right to the death, to take chunks out of each other, be battered and bruised, and then Denver just can walk it next week, take them down, whoever it is in 4. So there we go. Right, bit of trivia then. I know you boys love a trivia, and we didn't get to do it on the watch party. So I have 2 for you. It's one of my famous "Who Am I" quizzes. So first player, right? He was drafted in 1997. Played for the Utah Jazz originally.
Matt Harper.
No, he was drafted by the Magic, mate. Come on, get it right. In 98, he played for Los Angeles Clippers. Played for the Magic between 2000 and 2002. Played for the Minnesota Timberwolves between 2002 and 2007. And then finished his career with the Golden State Warriors. Kind of only 9 games. Back in 2008. What are we thinking, boys?
In all seriousness, would it be Felton Spencer?
It isn't Felton Spencer, no.
Just reel them off again, G.
So, Jazz, Clippers, Magic, Wolves, Warriors. And if I told you he played for the Magic with T-Mac, that might help you out a little bit.
The only player that I can think of, and I'm not confident of this, is Troy. No?
Troy Hudson?
Yeah.
T. Hud, also known as where did I see that? The Laker Killer on Basketball Reference. Yeah, Troy Hudson would be right, mate. Yeah. So there we go. Well done on that one.
It was the Timberwolves one that gave me the idea. But there we go.
Yeah.
Troy Hudson.
Troy Hudson. God bless Troy Hudson. Right, second player. He was drafted in 1995 by the Golden State Warriors. He played for the Boston Celtics then in 97, 98. He then played for the Cleveland Cavaliers up until 2000. Played for the Magic in 2000, and he left the Magic in 2005 before retiring. He never averaged over 10 points per game in his career.
Sorry, who's
in 95?
I'll go through them again. So Golden State, then Boston, then Cleveland, then Orlando. And again, he played on a couple of McGrady teams there.
Golden State, Boston. Tony Batty?
Not Tony Batty. No, he was drafted in 97 by Boston.
Not Andrew.
Do you want
de
a clue?
Klerk.
Oh my God, he's only gone and done
Yeah,
it.
the hammer.
He's on fire.
He's on fire. The hammer himself, Andrew de Klerk. I thought you might have got that, Gary, because you mentioned Matt Harpring, and obviously he was traded for Matt Harpring
I've got one for you. I've got one for you.
On, then.
Here we go. I can already guess this one.
I was born in Wichita.
Oh, here we go. Grady Dick.
Oh, well done. Well done. He's the Gatorade. I was going to say he's a Gatorade National Player of the Year.
Yeah.
He's obviously plays for Kansas. Small forward shooting guard. 6'8". Sunrise Christian Academy. Drafted by the Orlando Magic.
Amazing. You've got Dick on the mind, Gary.
Well, gee, is the vasectomy man. You've also got Dick on the mind at the minute. So.
Oh, very good, mate.
Bless you.
Very, very good. So I think that's going to wrap it up this week. Anything else, boys?
No, absolutely not.
No? Okay. Right, so I guess we'll see you next week. But thank you for listening and watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Orlando Magic UK, and please leave us your comments. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Orlando Magic UK. So from Gary, Mikey, and myself, until next time, go Magic.